Hello and a warm welcome to our Halloween special. It's gonna get creepy today, and what's better than a few creepy stories to get in the mood? I think we all have some stories where we got goosebumps or just simply shook in fear. And today we'll listen to some of those stories. We have here Cheyenne, Glacio, Xaver, and Sasha. Oh, and of course Adukas. We mustn't miss out on him. And they will be sharing their creepiest Halloween stories with us. Yeah, so Adukas is probably not gonna say too much on this topic, but yeah. Amused, smiling, and laughing. Yeah, you might just be right with that one. But it would be interesting what he would tell us. Yeah, of course, but he seems to be camera shy, and I think we shouldn't trouble him any further. So, who wants to begin? Everyone look at themselves and remain silent. Yeah, I thought so. So I prepared some papers with numbers on them for you to pick. Everyone, please draw a paper and whoever's got number 1 begins. Everyone draws a number. Sasha takes a relaxed breather. Xaver smiles with a stare look on his paper and takes a breather as well. Alright, I already know who's beginning. Xaver. Darkness and Cheyenne smile. Yeah, I drew number 1, so I begin. So, it was the Halloween 6 years ago when my grandpa came to visit us. He's a merchant and he's not coming home very often, so we were really looking forward to see him. The guards almost hadn't let him through the gate, but after a long discussion he could convince them with his wares. So he was going to sleep at our house for Halloween, and after we ate dinner and Cheyenne and I had been out playing trick-or-treat, we went to sleep. And then the spook began. I gotta say, I'm not easily startled and I'm not easily frightened, but at that night, yeah, it was different. I woke up at midnight because I heard strange noises. At first I thought I was still dreaming or imagining things, or there were still people outside, but after a while I listened closely and I became wide awake, so I couldn't go back to sleep. The noise was just so unsettling. It sounded scratchy and was very loud in the silence of night, like some sort of growling, but not quite. At first I thought it was gonna be a burglar who was trying to get into the house through the door or the window, so I got up and picked my wooden sword back then. Yeah, I'm sure he would have ran away in fear if he saw you with that, smiles. Psst, shut up, smiles. Well, anyways, I wanted to go down to the ground floor with it. You see, my room's on the first floor, but when I arrived at the door, it was pitch black, by the way, and I was really scared at that moment. And I would have rather just gone back to bed and hid under my blanket, but I wouldn't be able to just forget about it, and I was worried about my mother, so I wanted to go down and have a look. So once I arrived at the door and opened it a little, the noise was suddenly getting really loud, and it reminded me of the growling of a bear. I was pretty sure then that it was not a burglar anymore. There had to be a wild animal in the Undercity, and it would try to get into our house right at the moment. I was scared that it would attack my grandpa and my mom, so I ran down to the front door and stood there holding my sword with shaking hands ready for attack, until I realized a while later in my excitement that the noise wasn't coming from the door. No, it came directly from the living room. The wild animal or whatever it was must have already came in somehow and would already prepare for eating my grandpa. And after that me. So I thought, and without thinking for a long time, I wanted to help grandpa and stumbled through the darkness to him to wake him up so he could sneak out together with me and didn't have to die. So I stumbled as quiet as possible through the pitch black room, still holding my sword, shaking, and once I arrived at my grandpa's sleeping place, the noise was incredibly loud. I thought that when I had a chroma candle now, I would look the beast right in the eyes. So I woke up grandpa and whispered to him that he had to get up as quick as possible and had to escape. Grandpa, though, was too sleepy and just asked what, where, why. And I didn't have the nerve to explain him what was going on when the beast was right in front of us, and so I just said that he's gonna die if he didn't get up now. That said, he was getting more awake and asked again what was going on. I was already totally crying and lost my nerves. Smiles. Very embarrassing story. Then I noticed that it was dead silent and I got even more scared. But Grandpa just stood up slowly and lit the chroma candle. Then he saw me, how much I was crying, and stood there shaking, holding my wooden sword in my arms, and looked around. No beast in sight. Grandpa took me in his arms and calmed me down, but I couldn't rest at ease and was still scared. My mom woke up too, and after she heard my story, she smiled and said that the beast was probably Grandpa because he snores so loud when sleeping. Everyone smiles and laughs. You're such a scaredy cat. How cute. Pff, shut up. I usually don't get scared. Yeah, right. Smiles. Looks at Cheyenne, who evaded his look. Angel. Closes her eyes and smiles. Hey Xaver, thanks for the story. I gotta say, it was very funny and good to know that the brave, strong Xaver was afraid of something at some point in his life. His eyebrows twitch and he looks embarrassed aside. So, who's next? Here, my angel dies to tell her story next. Stop that, looks at him smiling. But yeah, he's right, I got number 2. Ah, nice, then you may start, Angel. Darkness and Glacio high five and laugh. Oh man, sighs. Well, my story resembles Xaver's, but has nothing to do with him. So, back then I was 10 years old and I hadn't got Adukas at the time, Pat's Adukas. So I had no guardian to protect me when I was afraid. She smiles. And I was outside with Xaver at Halloween's Eve too, playing trick-or-treat, and it was really cold for that time of the year. A few days after that, it had already snowed. So we hadn't played too much outside, and we got home pretty early. We didn't get much treats as always, because the people in the Honor City just don't have much to give. But most of the treats were homemade cookies. Rosie's pumpkin cookies were among them. Those are such great cookies. There's pumpkin inside and a pumpkin on the outside. Smiles. Pumpkin inside and pumpkin on the outside, huh? Rolls with eyes and smiles. Oh, yeah, well, pumpkin cookies. Jeez. Rosie always makes such delicious cookies. But now back to the story. So I went home and we ate dinner too. Pumpkin soup. Smiles. Glacio smiles too. And after that I went to bed since I was tired. I fell asleep pretty quick. Sometime in midst the night I woke up because I was thirsty and saw, through the gap by the door, because I left the door open a little at night, some sort of fog coming into the room. I didn't know what it was, but it grew more and more, and I thought at first that the house is on fire, but then a silent high noise sounded and I was getting scared because I thought it was a ghost. I was 10, okay? I hid under my blanket and closed my eyes, but the noise became louder and louder, and at some point it started hurting my ears. So I decided to get up and try to exorcise the ghost. Since it seemed to do me no harm, I was still alive after all. So I got up carefully, and then suddenly I waved my arms around wildly and stepped with closed eyes into the fog, and I did that until it was gone. But through the gap by the door, there came more and more fog, and I heard footsteps coming from downstairs. I started crying and called out for my grandmother. She smiles. I was 10, guys. 10! So embarrassing. And my grandmother, she just called back if I was okay and what had happened. And then I thought that the footsteps must have come from her, but it could have also been a ghost that was just imitating her voice. But I was brave at that moment and opened the door fully and looked down just to see my grandmother in the kitchen standing by the stove. I was confused and asked her what she was doing and if she didn't hear the noise. She just laughed at me and stepped aside and said, "Ta-da! A kettle!" Darkness facepalms. Yeah, and she presented it so proudly, and she said she got it from Rosie, but it was a very old kettle and it had made the loud high noise, since my grandmother was preparing some tea because she was cold. Well, yeah, and then we drank some tea and ate a few pumpkin cookies. But I'm not finished yet. When I got back to bed, I saw through the gap by the door 2 glowing red dots down by the front door window. I blinked and they were gone. I thought it must have been my imagination, but I couldn't sleep anymore that night because I was so afraid. Oh! Did you ever find out what it was? No, not until this day, but maybe I don't wanna know. Or it really might have been my imagination. Maybe I can help. Huh? What do you mean you can help? Do you know something about it? Oh, that story, yeah. Cheyenne seems confused. Well, then I'll be the next to tell the tale of a creepy Halloween. I think the same story goes for Sasha Cutie here, since we experienced it together, right? Shut up, idiot! But yeah, I don't really have a better story for Halloween anyways. Right. So back then I was 13 and Sasha Cutie here was sweet 12 years old. We played trick or treat in the upper city as well, and I think we got a lot more than you down there in the undercity. But well, that's a thing we can't change for now, sadly. So we ran around, scaring people, and we had really creepy outfits too. I'd say for children we really looked scary. Yeah, that's right. And my little sister Genevieve was with us too. She got the most treats, of course. She was going as cute little kitty, I was a zombie sorcerer, and Sasha Cutie was a bloody nun. Don't ask why we decided to pick those. At some point we got bored of collecting treats, and so we chased after other children whose costumes we were fond of. And we wanted to know why they chose that outfit and if they wanted to accompany us to collect together. After a while we were a little group of children and we met a really big child who had the best costume of us all. He was going as werewolf. The head was so real, like the one of a real wolf, but the body was obviously human. But instead of hands he had paws with big claws. We wanted to know who he was and how he made his costume, especially those glowing red eyes. Oh. That's gonna be exciting. Yeah, the boy or girl didn't want to talk to us and just growled, showing us its big claws, but we actually found that really impressive. Genevieve, though, was going to be impatient and she wanted the werewolf to take off its mask. She was still so little and didn't understand that, since every other child took off their mask for her, the cute little kitty. So she went to the werewolf and pulled on his mask, and that really wildly. And the werewolf reacted with a jump backwards and growling. I was walking up to Genevieve and thought she was going to cry since she didn't get what she wanted. But she just stood there and gazed at the werewolf, who growled louder and louder. She whispered, "That's not a mask." And she took my hand. She then started crying and seemed to be super scared. Sasha Cutie noticed that all, and she grabbed Genevieve by the hand and they started running away, all other children with them. When I looked at the werewolf again, it was gone. Then I ran after those two, since I am the big brother and I had to take care of them. But at that eve I really wanted to look for the werewolf, to check myself if it was real or just a mask. But if Cheyenne had also seen two glowing red eyes, and it could be fitting with the time if he went down to the undercity after he had ran away. Yeah, now here it comes. The next day there was an article in the newspaper that an experiment from the human ranch had escaped whilst at transport, and everyone in the upper city should take care and tell the knights whenever someone sees something noticeable, and especially to take care when seeing a wild wolf running around. Glacio's parents didn't know what an escaped experiment had to do with a wolf, but Genevieve, me and Glacio looked at each other and we knew. What we had seen yesterday was real, and it was dangerous, and we were super lucky that we had made it out alive. Oh, wow. Cheyenne sits there with an open mouth and is obviously shocked. Xaba seems worried. Good that nothing happened back then. But we in the undercity had never got the news. Well, I think you up there don't give a damn about if we live or die. Xaba. Hey, watch your mouth. Don't you dare compare me to those upper city people, and even worse, that guy. Points her finger at Glacio. Glacio smiles, then becomes serious. The sad truth is that it really does not interest the people in the upper city how you are doing down there. Alright, let's keep that topic for later, okay? But that was a really interesting story, and funny that it's connected that way. Now please don't act as if you hadn't known. And now you, beloved goddess. What was your creepiest experience? Mine? Oh really now? Well, fine, I guess it's just fair if I tell a story too. But that's not a Halloween story. Nothing creepy had ever happened to me at Halloween. So, as you know, I'm currently living in another world and I'm undercover there, so no one knows me as a goddess. I'm disguising as a normal human there. So, I was little there too and lived with my mom back then. And she had a new partner at that time. It was a quiet evening and we sat in the living room. Then I had to go to the bathroom, and whilst I washed my hands, I saw a weird shadow outside. A human shadow. So I looked closely and could make out the person in dark clothes smoking under a lamppost behind our garden. So I hadn't wasted much of thought about it and went back to the living room, even though I knew that something weird was going on. Then it got later and later, and my mom and her boyfriend readied themselves for going to bed, and I was all alone in the living room. Then suddenly I saw the shadow through the window. The person was inside our garden. I ran up to my mom and told her what I had seen, since I was buried and needed her in the other world. You know, as part of my disguise. Then her boyfriend went outside to have a look, whilst me and my mom were watching from the bathroom window. And the man fled when he saw my mom's boyfriend. And she was shocked and pale and saying, "That was my ex. He's stalking us." Wow, that's really creepy. Hey, Beauty, it's nice to get to know your past a little better since we don't know nothing about you. You have my utmost gratitude for sharing these informations with us, Your Highness. Ah, you be quiet, sighs. Hehe. Did someone punish that guy? Haven't you got your sword somewhere? I would have shown this guy. The idea with the sword sounds nice and all, but that's not allowed in the world where I come from now. There are people similar to the knights called the police, but they're nicer and they have different weapons, but enough to that. But yeah, he was punished. Sasha nods. So, I have to say, that were a few really creepy stories to put us in the mood. Thank you for telling, and thanks Adukas for being here and being cute. Pats Adukas. And then I'd say I wish you all a nice Halloween.